going to say a couple words. We're thrilled once again to be joined by students from the Salisbury School, whose research documents the Northwest Corner's history of slavery. Their work has also revealed the lives of people who were enslaved, including James and Joseph Mars, about whom the boys spoke in our earlier sessions. Tonight is the third and final session, during which 5 members of the class will guide us through the process of documenting enslaved people through such primary sources as property, church, vital records, and census data. They will also talk about memorializing Joseph Mars's life with a witness stone. If you have questions, as I earlier mentioned, please put them in the chat or unmute yourself at the conclusion of the program. I would love to introduce to you, before we get started, the 5 students who are presenting tonight. We have Darren Tangular, who will be attending American University next fall. Kwa Nguyen, and who's choosing between Fordham, Purdue, and Tulane. Peter Vorbach, who's on his way to St. Croix, and has just finished up a squash season. Jack Delaney, a junior from Jacksonville, Florida, and Tom Galusha, who plays baseball and will attend UConn next year. So I'm going to turn it over to the boys right now, let them get started. I'm going to admit a few more people and mute myself. Thank you.
All right, so before we start, I do have to say that these boys are in the midst of exam week and at the end of a very long trimester, as you can imagine. And this baby came into port, like what time last night, Peter, did this finish?
I think like 9:30 or something.
So these guys have been like grinding right to the very end. So we haven't really practiced this Zoom. So it'll be a little more informal than weeks past, but let's start by watching the video. I don't know if Peter, Darren, Kwa, or Jack, and I don't know if Tom's on yet, if you want to introduce it at all, if you want to say anything about it. Why don't you introduce it, Peter, just quickly?
Yeah, so basically we're trying to tell the story of a very important man named John Newton Mars, who actually he grew up in Salisbury, Connecticut, and we're trying to prove the point that he may have influenced John Brown, who would later do Harper's Ferry, and he would be involved in Bleeding Kansas. So we're just trying to uncover this untold narrative.
All right, can you see the screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Americans have heard of John Brown. Most Americans have heard of John Brown. Almost no one has heard of the man who inspired him. A man from our very own backyard helped inspire an action that led to the freedom of millions after the bloodiest war in American history. We have been taught to envision abolitionists as white Americans advocating peacefully to politically change the system. However, we are also learning of an entirely different approach, one of violence and extremism, one embraced and made famous by men like John Brown. In 1846, John Brown moved to Springfield, Massachusetts. This bustling city was already a hotbed for abolitionist movements, as well as a frequent stop on the Underground Railroad. It also became a hub for advocates of a violent and radical abolition, one espoused by men like Reverend John Newton Mars. Because Massachusetts' Constitution outlawed slavery in 1780, the state had become a destination for Black people. Some from the South, but many from Connecticut and New York. Springfield became a home to a thriving Black community. The 1855 census listed 392 Black inhabitants. It also became a well-known safe haven for countless escapees fleeing slavery. There were numerous African-American churches, and with the Connecticut River economy booming, a thriving Black community developed under the leadership of men like Mars, William H. Montague, Thomas, Eli S. Baptist, and Alexander Du Bois, grandfather of W.E.B. Du Bois. Perhaps because of this, John Brown moved to Springfield, Massachusetts. According to Springfield historian Joseph Carvalho, his time there helped to confirm his belief in the evils of slavery. More significantly, it opened his eyes to the possibility of effective resistance. Many in the community, both Black and white, business owners, lawyers, and church leaders were deeply involved in the abolitionist movement. According to an article from the Springfield Republican, Black leaders took part in an extraordinary meeting on Tuesday, September 21st, 1850, of the colored citizens of Springfield at the Free Church to organize a response to the Fugitive Slave Act. This act declared that runaway slaves must be brought back to their Southern enslavers even if they resided in a free state. Furthermore, anyone helping them could also be arrested. In response, the group of Black leaders discussed and ratified a remarkable statement that was published in its entirety in the newspaper. Even though his name does not appear in the article, Reverend John Newton Mars of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church was most surely there. According to Springfield historian Cliff McCarthy, he had previously gathered Black pastors and leaders to drop a list rejecting the immoral 1850 law, as he thunderously exhorted his congregants to beat their plowshares into swords. For years, Mars worked tirelessly to improve the quality of life for African Americans in the United States. He promoted temperance societies for African Americans, as well as equal education opportunities for Black children. He was active in the Massachusetts and American anti-slavery societies and was an outspoken opponent of slavery. After serving in Salem for 2 years, Mars went to Upper Canada as a missionary to the enslaved who had been escaped to that area. Channeling this rhetoric, a year later, John Brown established a Springfield branch of the League of Gileadites. This group also recommended ways to help fugitive captives who had been arrested and captured. It also advocated for armed vigilance, militants, and uncompromising resistance. These words simply echoed the language already being used and acted upon by Springfield's African American community. As a civic and religious leader, it is certainly reasonable to assume that John Newton Mars was present to hear the words of his former Connecticut neighbor, especially as Brown's recorded words sounded so similar. United States history is typically taught in a way that highlights the contributions of white Americans. While John Brown certainly deserves a spotlight, so do countless Black Americans, like the Reverend John Newton Mars, who have been left out of the narrative. Our project looks to expand and unravel the story of impactful abolitionists like John Newton Mars, whose name is not mentioned in our teachings of abolitionism and history.
Okay. Thank you for watching. I want to ask the boys now, and you could feel it, whoever wants to feel it, you can, but maybe we'll start with you, Darren. How have you pieced together this story?
Well, originally we started with just the knowledge of, hey, there might have been some discourse between John Brown and John Newton Mars. And then we looked at where common areas could be, and Springfield stood out to be the only place where they were both at the same time for a prolonged period of time, where it was significant chance where they could have met. So from going from Springfield, we went to what church John Newton Mars was part of. And from there, we were able to see that he helped actually build that church, and we found connections going into that and others, and and freedom movements within Springfield that he was leading, as well as his connection with John Brown, which they knew a lot of similar people in the same circles. So that's like the whole lines between that we were originally investigating, and through that we were able to uncover all the information that we have found today.
Can someone give a quick biographical sketch of John Newton Mars's brother, James Mars? Like, that might be a good way to really bring out the local connection.
Yeah, so last year our class did a project on James Mars, which is John Newton Mars' brother, and we collaborated with the governor of Connecticut and also placed a witness stone for him, and did a whole ceremony. And from this we branched it to John Newton Mars, which we're currently doing research on today, and documenting his whole life in Springfield and how he helped be involved in like the freedom movement and the abolitionist movement. So yeah.
Good work, Qua. Hey, Jack, what about this project? Have there been any aha moments for you during this, like when you've made a discovery that you found pretty exciting?
Probably just learning about like all the special African American leaders, like abolitionists that I probably never would have discovered if it weren't for this class.
Yeah.
And I think like most history, like a lot more like history classes need to focus on like the African American leaders who made such a big impact on the abolishment of slavery.
Tom, in a lot of ways, the city of Springfield has interested us and frustrated us the most. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so one thing that, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, sorry. One thing that that we did to try to connect the two stories between John Newmars and John Brown was we reached out to a lot of historical like societies and museums and stuff like that to see if they had anything in their archives connecting the two abolitionists. Well, part of the thing that frustrated us a little bit was the lack of information that we were able to find. We were able to find some information about John Newmars himself, about a lot of information about John Brown himself, but we couldn't find that exact connection that where they're in the same room or they're talking directly to each other. So that was one of the frustrating parts. But that being said, I also think that's one of the really cool parts about our project because of, all these museums, all these historical societies, they don't have anything on them, but we're putting that together. So it's like, it's cool to think about how a group of high schoolers is able to, we were able to research on this project and do well enough to put together like a really, really close story. It's super frustrating that we don't have like that last like little piece, but the fact that we've gotten as close as we are, I think is awesome.
And so let's talk a little bit about that, right? The clues, right? You mentioned earlier, I think in the documentary that John Brown was born in Torrington, and just a little over 10 miles away, John Newmars was born. So there certainly was a geographical connection. They both moved when they were young, but perhaps their parents knew each other, or they saw each other when they were infants or toddlers. But there are other intriguing connections as well. Pete, you want to talk about some of the others?
Yeah, so it was definitely interesting to find out that both John Brown and John Newton Mars, they were both very religious. And that was from the beginning of their lives. They were raised in very religious families, and that impacted them later in life as they became reverends. And yeah, then part of the abolitionist movement, they definitely used Christianity and loving of your neighbor to justify what they were doing.
And talk about like the role of church in particular, right? That's where we really are hot on the scent of the smoking gun to put these two men together. Will you talk about that, Darren or Qua? Like the League of Gileadites and the
well, the League of Gileadites was created by John Brown after the Slavery Act of 1852, was it?
1850.
1850, yes. After the Fugitive Slave Act, the organization was created to help runaway slaves and make Springfield a true safe haven from slave catchers, which actually later on worked, where slave catchers were scared to go into Springfield due to the African American society there and how they would react. They actually found the hotel room that the slave catchers were staying in, and with mob mentality, around like 30 people were about to kill them before they escaped. So it was actually dangerous for slave catchers in Springfield, and that was successful. And after the League of Gileadites, they released a list of resolves as the society in Springfield combating the Fugitive Slave Act, as well as the general time. And moving from that, the League of Gileadites was seriously powerful in Springfield. Members of that group helped build the Methodist Church that's still there today, which is a pillar of the community. Yeah,
I think that was really well done. But to go back to Qua, maybe you could help clarify. the charter for the League of Gileadites, right? Where did that come from?
Yeah, that came from John Brown's ideology, and there was like more people involved, like Eli Baptist, I think, and a couple more people who came together in his room and decided.
But what about the language that Brown used? Where had we seen that before? Peter, you want to take that?
Yeah, so it was quite remarkable. The language and diction that John Brown used and their resolves were almost identical to the resolves that John Newton Mars had listed years before him. So that connection was very interesting. And that's why we definitely think that John Brown was influenced by John Newton Mars.
Okay, good job. And then Jack, what was the
Mr.
other?
McCrisky, can I ask you something real quick?
Absolutely.
One thing I think that's also important to notice between the two men was how intense and radical they were, because John Brown is known as this like psychotic abolitionist who was crazy. He was extremely violent, and everything he did was with a lot of passion. It was so intense. And then you have John Newton Mars, who really at this time he shared that intensity, and he was just as passionate about the entire process, with being more violent towards what they were doing in Springfield by creating that safe haven. I think it's cool to notice the similarities there between how radical they were, especially because of how that's one of the reasons why John Brown was so well known, was because of how radical he was.
Yeah, that's a great point. Hey Jack, when we went up to Springfield, what building did we visit?
We visited the armory.
Okay, talk a little bit about that connection. There was a federal armory in Springfield, right?
Yeah.
Where was the other federal armory? Go ahead, Pete, save him.
The other federal armory was in Harper's Ferry, which it's interesting that John Brown chose Harper's Ferry as opposed to the federal arsenal in Springfield.
Tom, why did he choose the arsenal in Harper's Ferry instead of Springfield?
Didn't that have to do with the location and how it was on the water, and it was a little bit easier to access rather than attack the army that was already in Springfield?
Quite possibly, yeah. That definitely could be a reason. But what's the big reason, Derek?
Being in the South, slavery, there was people to recruit in the
Oh,
area.
right. That's completely true.
Right.
Yeah, we went there. I saw the brochure. It turned into the only armory in the United States after Springfield was destroyed by the Union. So it remained to be a very strategic armory, and there is a lot of similarities where one could plot out steps on one and replicate them on the other. So the whole armory idea might have been derived from him seeing one in Springfield.
Yeah, I think that's another intriguing clue. Tom, I think because you've been the kind of correspondence person, what's been another frustration that we've had, particularly as it relates to Springfield?
I'm not entirely sure.
Well, how many people have you reached out to?
Oh, okay, yeah. So I've sent probably, it's got to be close to 15 emails to different places, reaching out, trying to see if anyone has anything on these two abolitionists, and it's been a real struggle to hear back from people, and especially to hear back from people with more than just stuff we've already learned. So that's been the biggest struggle we've had.
Yeah, and here you have this incredible community, the fact that there aren't volumes written about Springfield, Massachusetts, like a safe haven for fugitive slaves during, the 19th century.
I feel like even what was the name of the college that was right next to the armory?
Springfield Technical Community College, I think.
Yeah. So after we visited the armory, I went on their website to see if they had anything about John Newton Mars, just because he was so close to that that institute. They had nothing. So I even sent an email out to their their history page to see if like, hey, can we add this in? I feel like this would be a great thing for you guys to have and advertise on your website and put up there to teach whoever's going to learn about your school. And I didn't even get a response from them, which I found a little bit frustrating, kind of disappointing for that community. I feel like that's something that they could have definitely benefited a lot from.
Yeah, I agree with that. So that's what we got for John Newton Mars. Is there any questions that you have for the boys? You could unmute yourself and just ask. Oh, there is a question here. Was there any interaction with Frederick Douglass? The answer to that is tough to say. Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth lived in a community not far from Springfield at all. That was kind of like a utopian community. They raised sheep, and they tried to have a textile industry based on wool rather than cotton. And Frederick Douglass, we know, has met John Brown on a number of occasions, including on the eve of Harper's Ferry, where he tried to convince John Brown not to do it. And Frederick Douglass was super religious, and here you have the Springfield church community where they are talking about abolitionism, they're talking about slavery. So we know Frederick Douglass has been to the black churches. We don't have him in the room with John Newton Mars, though. Must have happened, but we haven't found that yet. We're looking, and we haven't given up hope.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when we were in Springfield and we were in that museum, I believe he was credited with with being part of building of the Free African Methodist Zion Church or Episcopal Zion Church.
Who, John Newton Mars?
Oh no, Frederick Douglass.
Oh, Frederick Douglass. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. He was definitely he would definitely attend a church.
Who was connected to John Newton Mars? We have proof of that, right? Thomas Thomas and John Newton Mars.
Yeah. And who else, by the way?
Joe.
No, Thomas. But who's the one that I keep? But we didn't really hit hard in that doc that we should. Who has another local connection in Great Barrington?
Eli Baptist or
no,
Dubois.
Yes, Alex Dubois. Yeah.
Yes, his grandfather.
WEB's grandfather.
He was involved in the also in the building of the church. He's credited.
Yeah.
So we could likely put them in the same room. We just have no definitive proof. They were both part of the same church, and they were both very religious men. So with those assumptions, I guess.
Yeah. There's another great question. Do the writings of white abolitionists talk about the black leaders? You may have noticed in that doc, the boys found an article from The Liberator, which was William Lloyd Garrison's abolitionist newspaper, where he talks extensively about John Newton Mars and the meetings in the churches, and that remarkable charter that they drew up that eventually was almost copied exactly by John Brown and the League of the Gileadites. So yes, they were very aware and supportive. Good question.
Ronan, could I ask a question? You referenced last week the collaboration of many schools in the area. Presumably all of them are doing similar research, and I'm just wondering where all this research goes, so that we can learn, the news is getting out, so that historical organizations and others will have this information for future.
Well, I'll let one of the boys handle that one.
It's on our website as well as YouTube.
So what's our website, Darren?
Searching for slavery.
No.
Troutback Symposium,
right?
Nope. These guys were not on the website.
Coloring Our Past.
Not in the development of the website, but yes.
Yeah. We actually changed the course name. It initially started as Finding Slavery in Salisbury, but John Newton Mars was never enslaved. He was the boys this year said we need to change it. And so they came up with it, and now it's called Coloring Our Past. Mm-hmm. And so if you go to the website, www.coloringourpast.org, and I'll type it in the chat. Oh, Pete, I just accidentally typed it to you. Will you send it out?
Yeah,
And so that is the virtual home of all the projects that will be shown at the Troutbeck Symposium this spring, April 27th, 28th, and 29th. 29th will be open to the public, so stay tuned for more details on that. But there is Salisbury School, Sharon Center School, Housatonic School, Valley Regional High School, Hotchkiss has 2 classes involved. There's another class here in English involved. Marvelwood's involved, and the entire 8th grade of Indian Mountain is 9th grade in Indian Mountain's involved. So there's a lot of people that are looking at these stories, and they're going to share them at the symposium. And then also the Salisbury Association is going to host an exhibit afterwards in downtown Salisbury.
Terrific.
Live for more updates that are kind of recent, you can check out our Instagram as well, Coloring Our Past.
I was going to add to that. We also we spend a lot of time on posting stuff on our social media. We have an Instagram and a Twitter, so that's where we can kind of, you get a little bit like a sneak peek of what we're going to eventually put up onto the website and up onto the YouTube.
And will you guys type that into the chat as well?
Keep looking up.
yeah. I'll put the usernames.
Okay. Liz, do you want to ask this, or do you want me to ask it?
You can ask it.
Well, I mean, happy to turn the floor over to you, but I'll ask it if you want me to.
Probably better for you too, because there's a lot of
All right.
ambient noise where I am.
Got it. Okay. So this is for all you guys. In what ways has your research and learning changed the way you think about history and history of enslaved people in particular?
I'll answer that. So I think that during the beginning of the year, we really talked about, we were focusing on like the, how everything was local and how everything was in the Northeast, that we would be like, researching within the class. And initially I found that very surprising, because when I was younger, we were always taught that, oh yeah, there was only slavery in the South. People were only mistreated in the South, and the Northeast was praised as these, as these heroes and these people of, like they were praised as ones who who weren't racist. They didn't do anything towards they wouldn't punish black people at all. They wouldn't do anything like that. And then I come to this class and I learned that, well, without a lot of the things within the Northeast, slavery in America would never have grown to the extent that it has, which I initially was very, very surprised about. So the fact that there were a lot of problems with involving race in the Northeast, I found very surprising. So I thought that was really cool to learn in the beginning.
Great answer. Go ahead, Darren.
Adding to that, Galusha mentioned that northern infrastructure is what really led to slavery being as thing. But what northern ports really allowed for slavery to export and import whatever goods and things they needed to, which is another thing which I was shocked to learn. Once again, in most history classes in American history, you never learn about the North's involvement in any of this, but it logistically does make sense. The South didn't have the capabilities to transport or do any of these things.
Great answer. Anything else anyone want to add? Okay, here's the next one. How can or will you use your voice to address the present day inequities experienced by descendants of enslaved people?
Yes, I definitely think that being aware and just knowing like what has happened in the history, in our history, that's just the first step of being able to understand other people and what people have been through. I've definitely learned that from this project by being able to get so involved in someone else's life and experiences.
Yeah, and also through our work, we want to inspire other schools, other peers to like do the same and get information that we don't have like currently, so we can spread it all around and share it like on social media, which is a great platform to like spread news. Also contact like universities and also museums to add these information to our education system.
This class isn't just educational, it has had real world effects that have showcased things such as the witness stone. The Caesar's descendants actually came to Salisbury. There, like, these are serious things, and even in Houston, in a proposal meeting, we were mentioned, and that's real world effect, that it's inspiring others to do this kind of method of class.
That was pretty cool. That it was north of Dallas, a small town north of Dallas, but we actually have the Wizard of Salisbury on the Zoom as well. Do you know that story, Catherine, about Katrina?
Good evening, everybody. Which one? Which story?
The one where the school board.
Oh, of course. Yeah. First of all, you guys are just amaze me. That's all. I just got to say that again. And the answer to the question you just asked them, the young man. I'm sorry, I'm not getting your name straight right now. When you said, how is this gonna make you change, or how is this gonna affect you in terms of making changes and all? What you all are doing now is it's unprecedented. What you're doing as a school and as individual students, and putting as much time and energy as you are, and putting out as much information as you have, is extraordinary. So, I mean, if I'm not going to say don't do any more, but if you never do anything else, well, since you finish this project, and it's not going to finish, I know that, you put enough information out there, and as I told, I don't know, which I talk a lot. I said one time, it's like you started a movement. Like this is picking up. This isn't, what was it, 2 years ago? This started out as one class, one school, and look what it's turned into. So it's phenomenal, and I mean, hats off to you guys. As high school students, I think it's going to continue to grow. It can't do anything else. It has to grow, because everybody's listening in and picking up, what you all are putting out there. And the fact that it's on Zoom and that people can look at it over and over, or even share it with other people, that's the other thing you have the advantage of, having the internet to put this information out. That's a huge advantage. So it's going far and wide. And believe me, even though those are not on, who may not be on, are going to see it. Because I look at the counts, believe me, I go look at Coloring Our Past, and I look at the view counts as it goes up. That's my thing. That's my daily thing.
What are we at now?
Huh?
What are we at now?
Last time I checked, I think we were hitting 1,500.
Okay.
Just on the Caesar family. So yeah. I try to keep up with that one, and there's a couple of more.
And so Catherine's daughter Katrina is a mom in a suburb of Dallas, and there's critical race theory is being debated, and Texas is one of these states that has passed laws, and Katrina presented the movie at a school board meeting as a way to do it right. This is how communities should do this work, and it really doesn't fit into the talking points, right? Because these kids aren't feeling guilty about the past. Like, these kids are actually doing something to make it more just, right? They're feeling empowered. Coming to class every day with them is like the most fun I've ever had teaching. I'm not teaching, right? I'm learning from these guys every day.
And can I just say about the Dallas meeting? I forgot, I got off point. So my daughter got up and spoke, they give you 2 minutes or so if you're a parent. They were debating whether or not to include African American history in their curriculum that year. They had actually voted it down. Yeah. There was one board member, I believe, who was very adamant about it, who happened to be African American. And my daughter got up, and in her 2 or 3 minutes, she spoke about how, she, knowing her family history, had helped her as a young person, and is helping her even more now because she knows more about it. And she said the problem, everybody said what the problem is the parents are afraid that if you guys learn this, you will be being, led astray or something like that. And what she did was said, if you want to see how it's done right, and you want to see what the result can be, I want you to take a look at this little video, this three-minute video or whatever she had. And she actually emailed it also to all of the board members, not just, because they only gave her 3 minutes. So she had to email it to everybody. And a couple of professors that were in the audience actually asked to have it sent to them at the University of Texas, because they said a lot of these high school kids are coming in here and they have to be totally re-educated, because they're coming in here without, proper education about, the truth about history, and even an older lady who said she went to school there all her life. She said, when I got out in the world, I realized I didn't know anything about, Black history. And so she was, telling the school board that she hoped her grandchildren would have the opportunity to learn something. So you guys are really you're way ahead of the pack, okay? And your leader, of course, is phenomenal also.
Not leading, just learning alongside. And I will say also, by the way, Katrina Moore had been trying to get her mother to move down there because she was telling her it's going to be safer and she'd keep an eye on it. And then Catherine is watching
the news.
The Oath Keeper get arrested for the January 6th riot, crisis, sedition, whatever. And as she's watching the helicopters swerve over the house where they're raiding the house, it happened to be Katrina Moore's neighborhood where she was trying to have her mom.
And you want me to come there?
So it's real, right? Like that. A lot of people don't want these stories told, which I think just adds to the trauma and prevents the healing. Is what is our mentality as we tell these stories. All right.
Roon, and there are a couple questions here in the chat. May I share them?
Sure.
One asks, the school you mentioned and other institutions were all in Connecticut. This is in reference to the symposium. Are also schools and or organizations across the broader New York State involved? And then a second question as a follow-up is, how about schools in the Springfield as well as Great Barrington area?
So we tried, we tried every school in the area in Massachusetts and New York, and it's new, right? And it project-based learning is scary, especially for teachers, right? You're not in control, you're giving up control. And what I've learned is you give up control and you're not disappointed, you're blown away, right? I told these boys to be on the Zoom at 6:45 to be ready, and I think they came rolling in 7:05, and I knew they were going to show up, right? Because this is important, right? And so I wasn't panicking, I wasn't stress eating, I was trusting them, and look how well they did. And this is an incredibly important story, but that's scary. You're giving up control. So we didn't get a lot of schools to sign on in this round. The WSAIC project is a part of the Troutbeck Symposium, and they have students who go to Weebatuck and Dover Plains and Millbrook. So there will be a small group through the WSAIC project participating. But yeah, we want all these stories told. And as for the Springfield one, this model of education is so exportable, right? It's not like you have to buy an $80 textbook, so I would love it if history departments around the world turn the kids into historians rather than read chapter 3 and answer the odd questions in the back, because that's not how they're going to remember it. They need to know it. Tom, you wrote about this in your reflection a little bit about how you used to do school and how this has been different. Will you talk about that for a sec?
Yeah, and to be fair, I will take full credit for rolling in here a little bit past 7. I could not, for the life of me, on my computer, it was not letting me sign into the Zoom without signing in, and then my email was all messed up or something like that. But regardless, yes, this class is it's different than anyone I've ever taken before. And it's different in a very positive way. And what I found is, through the learning that I've had to to do on my own, it's helped me in a lot of areas outside of the classroom, and also, you know, and it's helped me in my other classes and in life in general. I mean, you go from, you know, following a very strict curriculum to where you know exactly what's going to be on each test or each quiz, and you do it in the pattern that I, you know, buried myself in was with, I would memorize something for one quiz, and then after that quiz was taken, I would forget it. So I was not learning, I was briefly remembering what we had done solely for that one quiz. And now that I've had the freedom to do my own research, to do some research, something I'm passionate about, and something that I am that's going to create change, instead of memorizing for a week and then forgetting, I've learned it, and I've truly learned it to the point where I know the material, I know what's going on and stuff like that, and I can. And by learning how to do that, I've learned that in other classes, it's easier to invest in not just memorizing and forgetting. It's a lot easier when you fully when you buy in on the project and you buy in on your learning, because that's the only real way to do something correctly is to do it with all your energy going forward. And by, you know, having this class be project based and be based on my own experiences, I've been able to buy in, and by doing that in this class, I've learned to do it in my other classes and in a lot of other things in my life as well, which was fantastic. So
I hope every teacher gets to hear an answer like that one day, because it's your learning. It's not me teaching, right? You guys have taken control of your own learning. The question, so that's a long answer, really long answer to your great question. The answer is, like, if you know schools that want to get involved in this, have them get in touch with us. Like, we want them involved in this. Like, we want these stories told. There's no fee to get in. Like, there's no, like, it's just doing the work. And I'm happy to you know, speak with them about partnering with us or advising about how to go solo, or even better, having the kids tell them, you know, to have Tom and his friends just share their experiences. Way more powerful than me.
unfortunately, the hardest part has been getting a response from the schools that we reached out to. It's not even the fact that, like, we haven't, they're turning it down. It's the fact they're not even considering it. So one thing we got to figure out how to do is how they get their attention in the first place. Because I think if we were able to get on a Zoom call with some of these schools and talk about the work that we've done and the experiences that we've had, I think that they would have a really hard time saying no, enjoying what we're doing here.
Yeah. I mean, my dream is that every community in the country does this work, because there are, you know, as the Reverend Cleo Graham said last year in James Mars Day, there's a lot of lost souls to be found, right? Where every community has these stories, every community of just people that history kind of has ignored, forgotten, or erased in many instances. So let's tell the stories, let's learn from them, let's get better. The arc of history is long, but only bends towards justice if people push it that way. So why not empower kids to do it, to make change in their world? Like, it's not about making them feel guilty, right? That's just a lame talking point. It's about empowering them to do good. All right. Any other thoughts or questions? I do. If there's not, I want to just leave with this. Like, I want to thank Caroline Birchfield and Noble Horizons. Like, anytime these kids have a story to tell, she always gives us a platform, and her heart just makes this town better. I want to thank Scoville Library, who reached out and asked us to do this and gave us 3 nights to do it. I want to thank Salisbury Association, who's been very supportive along the way, the Tropic Symposium, the Berkshire Taconic Foundation, the Upper Housatonic Heritage Area. Like, these are all organizations that make our communities better, right? That layer on top of one another. And the fact that we're all participating in, like, something good, something just positive, makes me feel blessed and makes me feel optimistic for the future. It's a dark time now. And so the best way to get optimistic is to be around these kids. It's the fountain of youth. And I think everyone here tonight, and you can hear my voice breaking, can feel it. So I'll shut up now.
It's been powerful and it's been such a gift to all of us. I mean, not only what we have learned, but to learn from these young people. I'm so grateful that they'll be moving forward and taking hold of our future, the future of our country. And
Amen.
thank you for your
And
leadership.
Darren's
and
never going to
inspiration.
let me hear the end of this. I know. I can already see the smile on his face.
It's not the first time either.
No, it's not the first time. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank you.
Caroline. Good work,
Thank
boys.